We're going to continue to stay on time. Welcome to the session on urban economics. We have three papers, Nick, San, Ethan Gu, and Harold Mazur. 30 minutes each. Do you prefer 5 minutes at the end for question or take all the 30? And
I think maybe maybe question in during the talk.
Okay. All right. You have 30 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for including our paper in this program. So in this is a joint project with Thomas Jacobsen from Copenhagen. And in this project, we study the effect of housing assistance on family dynamics and the labor supply of men and women. Oh, this doesn't work. Okay. This doesn't work either.
Oh. Right now.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. So in the US, 99 million people, or 1/3 of the overall population, participated in one of the 10 major welfare programs. And housing assistance is definitely among one of the most important. So we can see the government spending on this program has far exceeded other welfare programs, such as cash transfer or unemployment benefits. So in this project, our research question is how do housing subsidy can affect family dynamics and the labor market gender inequality. So the idea is that housing is usually the public good within the household. So if the government provide housing subsidy, for example, to the couple, then the second earner, if the couple break up, the second earner can carry the housing subsidy. That's going to increase her outside option and empower her through among the relationship. So this can affect the family dissolution margin. And on the other hand, if a single people get the housing subsidy, she or he can afford to live independently. So basically, she doesn't need to form a relationship to enjoy the housing consumption with by moving to the partner's housing. So in that sense, it can also affect the family formation margins. And on the other hand, if a single person get a housing subsidy, we can think he or she become more attractiveness on the marriage market. So this can also affect the family formation margin. And on the other hand, the housing subsidy in the US is designed to be a means-tested program. So which means the overall, the eligibility of the program depends on the overall household income. So then we can think about if the couple get the housing subsidy, there is some specialization happening within the household. Because if the wife, she's working, it could be the case the overall household income is above the means tested level, so they won't get so much benefits. Then the couple can decide to specialize, maybe the husband will work in the labor market, and then the wife will specialize in home production. So this specialization going to, from the disincentive of the second earner to work, and going to generate this differential labor market response. And the third feature of the housing subsidy is that in the US, it's a highly rationed program because the demand for this housing subsidy is very high. So that means it's not very easy for the people to transit in and out of the program very easily. So usually when they get the subsidy, if they remain program eligible, they can keep receiving the benefits for a long time. So that means this specialization motif within the couple can really have this lock-in effect and can exacerbate their specialization motif. And this is going to generate some long-run gender inequality in the labor market. So in our paper, we are going to show that for the first household public good mechanism, we are going to show that the empowerment mechanism dominates. So that means in the data, we observe that after they receive housing benefits, the couple are more likely to break up. And it's going to increase in singlehood. And for the means-tested subsidy feature, we are going to show that among all the group of people, only the married men, their labor supply will not be affected. So both so within a couple, the wife will reduce her labor supply, but not the husband. And when we think about single men and women, both of them will reduce their labor supply. And for the third lock-in effect, we are going to show that it will be working through the couple's dynamic bargaining and generate this long-run inequality. So in terms of related literature, we are related to a large literature about the effect of housing subsidy. But different than the existing literature, we study the family formation and the dissolution margin, and also the implication for long-run gender inequality. And we also related to some discussion about different public policy, how that can affect gender inequality, and different than those policy that more likely to discuss a family level, for example, parental leave or childcare subsidy. So we study means-tested transfer program and how that interact with earning and family dynamics. And finally, we also methodology and conceptually related to the joint taxation and the gender inequality literature. So different than this strain of work, we analyze the household means tested level of in-kind subsidy, so which is supposed to be a very different redistribution policy tool. And also for this policy, it's targeted the low-income households. And it's also going to create some insurance value that can crowd out private marriage and affect the family formation. So the outline of the presentation, we will look at the institutional setting and then data and empirical motivation. And then we move to the model and the discussion about the counterfactual experiments. So for the housing assistance in the US, currently there are two largest programs. One is the public housing, the other is the Section 8 housing vouchers. So for public housing, the property are owned by the government, and then the low-income people move into those government-owned property. And for Section 8, a housing voucher is basically interact with the local housing market. So the government provide a subsidy to the recipients, and then they use the subsidy to rent in private market. And the two programs share very similar admin rule. For example, the eligibility are both depends on overall household income if that's less than 50% of the local area median income. And then the subsidy structure is inversely related to the total household income. So basically, if we suppose there is a household, so basically the recipient household pay 30% of their overall income for rent, and then the rest are going to be covered by the government. So suppose we have a household with monthly rent $1,500, and then their overall household income is $2,000. Then they only need to pay $600, which is 30% of their overall income for rent, and then the government can pay $900. So from this, we can see is actually a big stake for the household because the government can pay a very large share of rent, and it means a lot to the household, especially this program is designed in a long run term in the sense that if their income is below the cutoff, they can keep receiving the benefits forever. Okay, and this policy is definitely related to family formation because the means tested is based on the overall household income, and it cannot account for the second earner employment effect, because when we see the government, they adjust the household eligibility income by the household size. So we can see they choose the 4-person family as the base and then adjust the total household income. So if there is a single people, they pay the eligibility is 70% of the cutoff. But if they have a second earner, so it's a couple, then it's only adjusted by 10%. So it cannot fully account for the second earner labor income. So then this is going to create some disincentive for the second earner to work. And here, when we talk about family, it's also including cohabiting couples. And one important aspect of this program is who is going to carry over the housing subsidy when the family break up, because this means who is going to be empowered by this housing subsidy. So the rule is that if there is children, then the custody parent will carry over the housing subsidy. So if the couple break up, usually the mother will still get the housing subsidy, but the father will not. Else, if they don't have any children, then the original applicant could still retain the housing subsidy. So they could be either the man or the women, depending on who are defined as the household height at that time of application. And in our data, we can show that 82% of the housing subsidy going to be carried by the women after family breakup. So this is basically a subsidy that empower the women's outside option. And it's a underfunded program in the sense that this is not an entitlement and the government have to ration it. And there is always a long queue to wait for the housing subsidy. And the local public housing agency, they can allocate most of the subsidy to household with extremely low income. So there is another bar that they should allocate the majority of the housing subsidy to. And there's when they do the allocation, they usually rely on the waiting list or random lottery. So these are the usually two allocation mechanisms the government use. And there may be some preference for certain groups, but those preferences are not related to their labor market outcome or children or gender of the household. And this is supposed to be a long-run benefits that they receive the benefits as long as they are program eligible. So this creates some lock-in effect and exacerbate the household specialization. Okay. So for empirical motivation, we use the SIP data. So this is a short household panel last for 3 or 4 years. And we are using the panel from 2001 to 2018. And it has rich information on the welfare take-up, labor market outcome, and family formation, etc. So in this paper, we focus on working age sample and the non-college renters because they are usually the target of the housing assistance program. And we can think about this is a survey data is independent of the housing subsidy application. So we shouldn't be worried about strategic reporting of income. So for example, we don't worry about they will underreport their income in this survey data because of the housing subsidy. And also other studies show that SIP data aligns very better with registered data compared to other surveys. Okay, so for the empirical motivation, we are going to leverage the timing that the recipient household get the subsidy. And then we are going to run a study that look at the effects after they get the housing subsidy, what happens to their outcome, such as family formation and labor market outcomes. So here the time since housing assistance is the wave. So wave in SIP is more like a quarter or 4 months period. And then we are interested in the coefficient of the effect of getting housing subsidy on their outcome change over time. We also control for individual and time fixed effect and also other characteristics. So here the identification assumption is that the timing of receiving the housing assistance is not predicted by the recipients. So there is a some random variation of the timing, and then we restricted our sample to the only recipients sample. So we are using the not yet treated people as a counterfactual for the already treated people. Okay, and then we draw the effect on the share of people being single, and then look at their family transitions. So the left panel shows that after they receive the housing benefits, they are more likely to become single. And this could either from the fact that single people remain single or because the couple break up, right? So then in the second part, we are going to decompose these two variations. So what we do here is we condition on their relationship status 1 year before. So the blue line is for the couple who are married 1 year before receiving the benefits, and the red line is for single people. And we see whether they transit into single for the married people and whether single people are more likely to get married. So we see that both margins are effective. So it's both the case that a couple are more likely to become single, and also single people are more likely to be in a relationship. So that means both margins, the empowerment margin and also the single people more attractive in the marriage market margin. Both margins are operative, but the empowerment margin dominates because we see a larger impact. Okay. And then if the empowerment is a driver, we can think about the individuals who stand to gain a lot from this housing assistance should affect more. So basically the second earner, they are being empowered by this program, so they should have higher incentive to break up. So in order to check if this is a pattern, we split by the relative income of the household head. So remember, household head is defined as the people who is supposed to carry the housing subsidy after breakup. Then we can divided the household head by their type. So whether the head is a high earner in the household or a low earner in the household. So we do see that this increase in singlehood is driven by the low earner. So basically for those type of households, when they break up, the low earner will get the housing subsidy and be empowered by this program. Yeah.
Where that low earner is the household from?
So
there kind of strategic behavior when they apply. The low earner want to take a vote to kind of want to become the head.
Yeah. So basically, the head here is if they have a children, then the custody parent will be the head. So it now depends on their application status. But if they don't have a children, that depends on their application. And in our data is half men, half women. So it could be some strategic, like both of them want to be the head. But here we just see that if they are the low earner, they really want to break up. Yeah.
Quickly, maybe you can check whether the strategic get pregnant just to become the head of the household. Because I'm kind of curious about this trend for these low earners. Like why exactly the what's that break process?
Like, so it's a singlehood.
Yeah, I see.
So here we focus on the sharp, like we understand there is some pre-trend before, but here we want to focus on the sharp increase in singlehood after they receive the benefits.
So before they receive the benefits, your free periods are already under periods where they have applied already, or in periods where they haven't even applied yet. You cannot distinguish those two.
No, we cannot. Yeah, it could be some strategic behavior happening before, but the problem with this program is really hard for you to predict when exactly you will get the benefits, right?
Yeah, that I'm fine. I'm just thinking once people apply, I don't know if they need to maintain the eligibility while they are waiting. So then just the application already is, you could do also an event study if you have the data at the application moment, whether that already kind of changes the labor supply.
So the basically the public housing agency, they only check the eligibility at the time when they really get the subsidy, really time for them to get the subsidy. So they don't check every period on the waiting period.
When you apply, they don't ask you?
When you apply, they ask you, but they don't maintain the checking regularly. So it could be that when you apply, you are eligible, but then you have higher income. That's fine. But then at the time when you get it, you must be eligible. Yeah. And then we move to the labor supply of men and women. So here we do see that the women have a drop in labor supply, but not the men. And the drop is about 5 percentage point, which is substantial given this group. On average, their employment rate is just 50%. And then we check this employment further by their marital status. So here we look at single men and women 1 year before receiving benefits what is the employment effect, and then married men and married women. So for single men, we have very small sample, so the estimate is noisy, but we can see if there is a negative impact, it cannot be differentiated from the effect on women. But for married men and women, so for the husband and wife, we can see a clear differential effect. So it seems that after receiving the benefits, it is the wife that reduce her labor supply and then focus more on home production. So there is a specialization happening. And then for time's sake, I will skip this. So for the model, we are going to design to have a dynamic life cycle model where the individual goes through their life potentially in and out of relationship. So all the matching and the separation, they are endogenous and subject to different match quality shocks. And then the individual in each period, they are going to choose their labor supply and then housing quality, so which is their housing consumption that is being discretized into different grades. And then they also choose whether to apply for this housing assistance. So while in a couple, they will bargain over choices to maximize their joint utility. So this is a traditional limited commitment framework. And then the key for this for the family dynamics is their outside option. So the determines which determine their bargaining power within the household. So one thing is the affordability of public good. So we can think about if they can afford to live independently, then it's very easy for them to work out of the relationship. So with the housing subsidy, this can reduce the marital surplus and then empower the second earner to break up. And also this housing subsidy will also affect their attractiveness in the marriage market. So, and on the other hand, it can affect the behavior of men and women, especially their labor supply behavior, very differentially. And the other thing about outside option is their earning potential or their human capital. So the labor market behavior in the couple then can have this long run consequences for intra-household inequality. So the key model elements, we have the preference, the income process, fertility, and housing. So for the fertility in this paper, it's totally exogenous. And then housing is a big part which we model all the rule about the housing subsidy. And then income, we have the human capital part, which is the dynamics of the model. So for preference, individual utility from a composite good, which depends on non-housing and housing consumption. And then they have this utility of working, depends on their family status and also depends on whether they have children. And this utility of working differ for full-time and part-time work. And they also have a stigma cost to apply for housing assistance, which also depends on their family status. So for the income, we have a standard human capital process, which is a learning by doing process. And then fertility is totally exogenous. So for the housing assistance, we are going to model the rule in great detail. So basically, we are going to check the household whether their income is eligible and whether they apply. And if they apply, whether there is what is their probability of getting it due to the government rationing. So there's a lot of rule, but it's just like the idea is that if they apply, there is just a probability they will get it. So they will not get it for sure. And once they are on the program, so the third line is once they are on the program, and if they are eligible, they can keep receiving the benefits. Okay. So then the budget is that how we don't have a saving in the budget because this is a low income renters, and in our data they don't have a lot of saving. So we just have their labor income and then their income from other welfare program and also the child care cost if the mother are working, and then they spend their resources on housing and non-housing goods. So we are going to apply a two-step estimation. So calibrate some parameter from the literature and then estimate the rest using the simulated method of moments. So for the model estimation, we are going to match on the event study estimate from our empirical analysis. And then, so human capital process is key for our dynamic effect. So what we are going to do, we are going to use the hourly, the change in their hourly wage rate before and after on non-employment spell to identify the human capital parameters. And finally, we can use another source of variation to validate our model. So we have some data about the local government budget on housing assistance. And we can run an empirical analysis to show if the local government budget increase by 1 standard deviation, how that affect the household behavior. And then in our model, we can simulate this policy change and then to validate our model. So this is a matching for the human capital process. We still have some room for improvement, but now we capture the trend. And then finally, we want to talk about the counterfactual. So all the policy experiment, they are revenue neutral. So they won't increase the government budget. So one thing we want to do is to give the second earner deduction when they apply for this program. So now the adjustment based on the second earner income is very minimal. So this creates the specialization motif. But if we give the second earner some deduction, that can incentivize the second earner to work. And the second counterfactual we want to run is currently there is a policy discussion about whether we should build a work requirement into the program to mitigate the negative impact on labor supply. So basically, this can work through our human capital channel and then affect the long run gender difference. And then the last two is about the program feature. So one is that currently the program is rationed, so we want to make it the universal entitlement, but lower the subsidy to the recipients. And finally, we want to keep the subsidy fixed rather than make it related to income, to break the disincentive of working and Yes, yeah.
We would be afraid of policy to be counterfactual to remove the program and subsidize income.
So then it's become, I see. So, but that is out of the scope of housing discussion. So government do this in-kind subsidy because they think the low-income household, they consume less housing. So they really want them to have this particular good being subsidized. If we just give them cash or change the form of the in-kind, then it's not the purpose of housing subsidy anymore. Yeah. So basically that's all about this paper. Yeah.
I wonder what's the overall effect of this housing subsidy on women's bargaining power? Because on the one hand, if women are entitled for this housing when divorced, then that kind of improve their option.
Right.
On the other hand, you also talk about specialization. And women work less, and there's a depreciation of the human capital. Reduces the region of
That's right.
So these two forces kind of will be different.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
that's exactly we want to capture in the project. It's like there is an empowerment side through affordability of housing, but there is also a long-term disempowerment side through the reduction in human capital. So then it's become an empirical question, which one dominates and how that affects the bargaining power. So we are still now estimating the model, and we hope can answer that question after we get the estimates.
Follow up, this seems quite interesting.
One more question.
Yeah. That's like the marriage level will become kind of selective, right? So if you think about the average bargaining power, you are kind of thinking about average bargaining power for the remaining marriage. So there's also extensive margin because someone were not tolerable for marriage will kind of exit from marriage.
Yeah.
So there will be some kind of further discussion on that.
That's right. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Yichen Gu.
Yeah.
From Peking University talking about residential segregation in Chinese city. You have 30 minutes. Do you want 5 minutes at the end, or you want to take all 30?
Probably like the 30 minutes, I guess. So probably I can just go with that. Can you guys hear me well? Okay. So thanks for including our paper in this wonderful event. So this is story about the residential segregation in China, which is actually quite something new, right, for us living in China. So the motivation for this paper, I've been teaching urban econ in China, but in many cases, we have to borrow the facts from the Western countries. So my courses and I started a series of work trying to document descriptive facts of Chinese cities. So this is one piece of work along that direction. This is joint work with Jun Biaocheng, who is PhD student at NYU Stern, Xiaoruo Feng, PhD student at PKU. So she's here today. So both of them were master students at PKU when we started this project. So they are the ones who are most familiar with all of details here. So myself and Cheng Chen from Baidu Maps, and Rong Xi, who is the PhD student at Tsinghua University, and my long-term colleague Ben Zhou. So this is the first time I present something with the structure. So actually, I'll try to present it, okay, without this. Oh. Let me see. Let's change the. I don't know what happens. Oh, is this the?
What happened?
This is the new slide on the local drive, so should be there. Let me see. Control L.
There's too much.
Oh, so probably the slides are too big for that.
Can you just go through it?
Okay, like the.
Here.
Okay, my bad. So.
And then you can go back. Control it. Yeah.
So probably this one. Oops. Because they're too large. No, it's just only like the 10 meg. So I don't know how I can do it. Oops.
We checked the PDF. You changed it in the break, right?
Yes.
The new one.
Yeah. So
That's the one.
should I just find it on the desktop? Sorry, my bad, guys, but I will try to keep it on time. Carol promised I will not eat your time, so where's it?
That one is my USB.
Do you want to open the same or not?
Yeah, same, but okay, I will just use this one. I guess there are still typos there, but I will just use the old one. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. So my bad. Okay, let me go back to there. Okay, so everyone is familiar with the residential segregation in Western countries, right? Like by race, by income. So, and we care about it because there are many negative consequences on educational attainment, intergenerational mobility, right? So, but what is the reality in China, residential segregation? So far, there's no systematic evidence on levels of segregation in Chinese cities. So mainly due to the lack of the data that can cover all of China and define spatial levels. So probably the best data should be the income tax data from the state tax administration, but it's not publicly available, right? And if we use the survey data, most of the survey data, CFFS, CFPS, they have a small sample size, so definitely not enough to describe the situation in China. So what we do in this paper, we think this is the first detailed examination of residential segregation in Chinese cities. So why China is a good set? China has gone through rapid transition from the planned economy to a market economy. in the past 40 decades. So they actually provide a very unique setting. We can show how the expansion of housing markets and the spatial concentration of service jobs contributed to segregation just within a very short period, which actually will take hundreds of years to happen in a Western context. So what we do in details, first, we document the pattern of residential segregation. We actually calculate the degree of segregation for each Chinese prefecture using a normal source of grade-level population data by income, by education, from a leading internet firm, which is actually Baidu Maps in this case. So to document the trend, the problem with the internet data is that it is only available in the recent years. So if we want to go back to like the 30 years ago, 40 years ago, no way, right? So here we actually used one data set, which is the home mortgage data from one big city in China, so which is actually during 2005 to 2014. We actually use that to describe the trends in segregation in the recent 20 years. It is only a case study, but we think it still has like general implications for the overall China. With this kind of the cross-city variation and with that data set, we want to explore the predictors of residential segregation in China. Here we focus on two factors: the expansion of housing market and the spatial concentration of the service industry jobs here. So we will do two things. We first use the cross-city variation to explore, to show the correlation between these factors and the degree of segregation at the city level. And then, because from that home mortgage data, we can see the residential location choice from each individual. So we use that, we estimate a dynamic sorting model to further highlight the roles of the housing market and the agglomeration force. Yes.
So when using the mortgage data, so one potential problem that is that you only focus on the home owners, not on the renters.
We don't have any data about the renters here, so that's a very good question. So yeah, this is just the, that's very familiar with the data set. So this is only a subset of the data. So, but here we actually show some like the evidence to show it is quite representative. We actually validate the data against the data from Baidu Maps, so to try to show it is quite representative. So anyway, but we still think probably this is the best data we can use because you need to know the residential location choice, and also you need to know the social demographic information about each individual household. So this is probably the best we can show if we want to discuss the trend.
The income here, the wage income.
So yeah, from the home mortgage data, we actually have the information about the wage, monthly wage.
But usually, when you think about inequality, a lot of times it's well. And when people have multiple houses, and then you see much of the income.
Yeah, that's a good question. But here we actually can only observe like the monthly wage and also observe the education. Actually, in the following, we mainly show the results, which is the segregation by education, which is the rough proxy of the income, because in China, there's no official data set about wage. Probably the only one is from the 2005, the mini census. But about education, we have a lot like official statistics. We can validate the data quality here. So in the following, we actually will focus on education dimension. Thanks. Okay, let me show you guys what we find here. So first, Chinese cities display modest levels of residential segregation. So the average dissimilarity index is only 0.174 by education and 0.139 by income, respectively. So which is much lower than that in the US, in the European countries. So we also find, using the home mortgage data, we find the segregation level has been on the increase in the recent 2 decades. And it is mainly due to the housing market sorting. And we find that the housing supply, service industry GDP ratio, and the spatial configuration of service industry jobs and other attributes can explain about half of the cross-city segregation variation. And the estimation results of the dynamic model, we find that low education people actually have a higher housing price elasticity. So the story is that with the service jobs started to cluster in the 6th century, which attracted the high education people, pushing up the housing prices in the 6th century, which kicks off the low education people, linking people to the suburb. So simply with the difference in housing price elasticity, we can explain the rise of the segregation in Chinese cities. We don't need to resort to the racial preference, like the kind of that. So this is still like the ongoing, so we like to have the comments. So literature, so most of the literature focuses on the Western countries. In China, there are a few like case studies. They focus on one city or probably like 3 or 4 cities. Most of them use the census data because they use the census data as the township level and probably as the village level. And you guys know, because we usually measure segregation like using dissimilarity index, such kind of measures, they actually implicitly assume all of the interactions are within a spatial unit, and within a spatial unit between any pair of individuals, the intensity of interaction is the same, no matter how far away you live with each other within that unit. So in this case, the township average area is kind of like more than 250 square kilometers, so which is definitely too big to describe the segregation pattern in China. And here in this paper, we're actually using a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer width level data in China to describe the segregation. And in terms of the predictors, causes of segregation, in the Western context, they use like the racial preference to explain that. Here, we actually show that China as the transition economy, featuring increasing economic inequality, rising immigration, and the housing market sorting can explain that. So the context is so different. And we also contribute to the literature on dynamic spatial sorting.
Let me just a small question about the comparison with the Western countries. So this is a very naive perspective, but when I think of the US, for example, I imagine often the supply as being more or less fixed, so in terms of the houses and type of buildings and type of people who live there. And I'm wondering whether we should think of it that really about living this case as well, or is it different? Should I imagine that these are kind of new buildings being built and that is what's driving part of the stage of the market?
Yeah, so let me answer your questions in 2 ways. So first, probably also naive like the observation is that in the US, for example, in the same census tract, we probably find the homogeneous like the buildings, right? So which actually probably contributes to the rise of segregation. But in China, one probably good story, one good thing is that you will see like the heterogeneous buildings like within the same, probably the same spatial unit. So this is, so in the model, we are still working on housing supply side story. So if with that, if we adding like the demolition cost into that, probably we can talk more about that. But for now, we don't have any like the best answer to our question. Thanks. Okay. So let me give you guys some like the institutional background. So we want to try to collect evidence on that. Before 1978, China has been dominated by a centrally planned economy, right? So, and we expect this residential segregation should be quite low. First, so everyone gets the wage is set by the government. So the wage is highly equalized. So second, there was no housing market at all. Everyone gets the housing from the employer, actually from the government through the Danwei system, right? So, and you can see at that time, like the living conditions was quite poor. In addition to that, the immigration was also very low, right? So only like the 1/4 of GDP was created by the service industries, and also the basic consumption services were integrated with the Danwei system in the same yard. After 1978, so a lot of changes happened. So first, income inequality has risen. So there are some evidence documents like Gini coefficient has almost doubled based on the story by Xin, right, and his courses. And also Piketty presented evidence about the increasing income share by the top 10% people. But we have to see that there are no good data behind their estimates. So currently we are working on to calculate the income inequality at the city level using this set from e-commerce platform. We actually are working on to use the inequality in online consumption as a proxy for that. We are working on that. And second, with the housing and land market reform, people now can vote with their feet. So you can, based on your income, based on your education, you can sort into different neighborhoods. So this should contribute to the rise of segregation. So one number here is that like the residential building stock increased by almost 150% during the recent, should be 20 years, sorry, I think. So in the meantime, the Malaysian economy has also risen. You can see the rapid expansion in the service sector. GDP ratio increased from 1/4 to almost 60%. And also the service jobs started to cluster in the city center. In the following, we're trying to combine some evidence to document this change. So yeah, this is actually one picture, one corner in Shanghai. So you guys can see actually up front in there here with the red, this is the first worker village in Shanghai. It was built in 1950s. So this kind of building was called the cross-shaft style building. So it is quite common in Eastern Europe, in former Soviet Union, right? So actually these buildings were mainly for their workers from the textile factories and hardware factories. So you get it from your employer. And away from us, so in the yellow box, that was the commercial buildings built in 1990s. So after reform, now you can buy commercial housing based on your income. So this is something we want to show here. Okay, so data. We use the grade level population by income, by education data from Better Maps. So this is the leading provider of navigation service, similar to Google Maps or Apple Maps in the US context. So it is embedded in many mobile applications, not just the Baidu products. So what we do for each mobile device, Baidu Maps app first infer where you live and where you work based on your location histories in the past 3 months. So we know your typical location at night. So this is where we guess the population count for each 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grade. And then Baidu wants to know who you are. So they infer your gender, your education, your income, applying actually this is still a black box to us. They use the approach featuring the fusion algorithm. I'll skip the details here, but so we actually have to do a lot of validations to validate their quality. Okay, now we aggregate each individual to the 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grid. So we know for each grid, number of the population counts, and like by education, we classify people into 2 types, high school and below, or probably like some college and above. In terms of monthly income, like less than 2,500, no, higher than that. We don't play with data. We have to send the codes to the engineer at Baidu Maps, and we have to get it back. Okay, so this is what the data looks like. Okay, so you can see each dot represents 1 grade, and you guys can see it. Actually, the coverage was quite good. Like the mountains, the rivers, there was no people at all. Okay, I already mentioned we actually use the education as the baseline because we can do validations, and also the share is more stable across different prefectures. So I will skip the validation part. So just believe me, this is probably the best data we can use, even though there are some like deviations here. So home mortgage data. So the best thing about home mortgage data is that we know their current address, and also we know their new address. So we can, if you take it as if you only make one residential choice, so we can calculate your segregation index in the beginning and also in the end, even though you don't make the purchase decision in the same time. So we also calculate the features of cities to explain the variation in segregation levels. So first we construct the housing market expansion, which is the log change of residential building volume from the GHS building volume data. So second, we document the agglomeration level from the firm tax data, and also from the GDP ratio from the statistical yearbooks. And from the census 2020, we get the population. And also we calculate whether the road network is brick-like, rectangular or something else. And then we use the mostly widely used measure, the index of dissimilarity index, which actually ranges between 0 and 1. 0 complete integration, 1 complete segregation. So we actually test many different measures, and we decide to go with the dissimilarity index because the other indices are highly correlated with it. So let me show the results. So this is the first, we show you guys the segregation index for each of the prefecture in China in November 2019. And here's the results. I already mentioned mean, right, by education, which is only 0.174, and by income is only 0.139, right? And we use different definitions of cities, like the aggregation of the urban districts or something else, and we compare it with the international US cities and European cities, and overall it is still lower than those in the other countries.
Good question.
Please.
Help me to understand the examination calculation. So if you have in the first step, you have some kind of measurement error.
Okay.
Right. Will the measurement error create the attenuation problem? Because right, so if you have this kind of noise part, then these two things will have more similar in terms of maybe less correlated.
We actually get the data from Beijing as the village residence community level. So we get like the high education ratio. This is probably the most reliable data source we have. We actually compare our data in terms of the high education ratio against the official statistics. And we find there's actually systematic deviation because the ratio of high education is much higher from the Baidu Maps data, because Baidu Maps only capture those guys with who use the smartphones. So this is something, but if the bias, if the deviation is systematically like the uniformly higher from Baidu Maps, then in this case, the bias could be minimal. That's our expectation, but we're still working on that to show you guys more robust evidence on that.
Yeah, it's only about the comparison. Because if you want to really compare with other data without measurement error, then there's a little bit harder in terms of like how much.
Okay, so what we can do is to run like some simulations. For example, if there's systematic, like every grade is kind of with the 10 percentage points higher, then what could be the bias to the overall segregation, and then probably, yeah, also fun. Thanks. Please.
Possible to have the age, for example, you can figure out the story that is changing very dynamically. The picture you showed, then this new building is really young people. Some buildings really old people. If you really find who are
okay, the problem is that even from census data, we don't have the very detailed like the by population distribution as the grade level to do the validation for that. If I understand the question.
So not validation, just performing the segregation by a
I will think of that. Okay, thank you. I will talk to you.
How about we let him, he has 3 minutes and hasn't gotten to the.
I only have 5 minutes, so let me just try to. My bad, that's my problem. Okay, yeah. So I will skip the maps while showing the difference. So I showing like but anyway, except Hangzhou, most of them are located in northern China. So yeah, let me show you the trends. So this is from this large city. So here I will skip details, but here we actually show the before and after, and you can see, and after the change in residential location, the segregation indices increased from this 100,000 people in this city. So, and we show the sorting between buyer and housing by income, by housing prices, and we find that it's actually, we find strong evidence of the positive associative matching. Okay, and so at the city level, predictions, right? You can see actually the residential building volume change can explain like the almost 30% of the variation in segregation across different cities, and it comes next probably population and some other things. So this is the first part. This is actually why we started this project. So yeah, just a few words about the model, right? I will skip the motivating evidence of that. So this is just a dynamic sort of model, right? So there are two types of individuals, high education and low education, to be consistent with our irreducible evidence. And there are J location, residential locations within the city. And for now, we only have two workplace locations, downtown and suburb, and each location endowed with the exogenous amenities which change over time. And this is the flow utility here, right? What matters is the residential place amenity, housing price, commuting cost, and we have the moving cost here as the C. So with the flow utility, we can set up the value function, which is the today's utility plus the expected utility all the future periods, right? And with the logic shocks, we can write it as the conditional choice probability. And this is what we can observe from data, like in 2010 where you live, and in 2011 where you move. And then we are trying to work on the housing supply part, but let me skip the details here. So we actually used estimation methodology following the paper by Davis and Hartley and their paper. So we estimate the stationary dynamic location choice model with the Hot-Biner type demand system. So under stationary equilibrium, we can write it as that. In terms of estimation, so I will just give you guys like the intuition behind that. We have the two steps. In the first stage, we estimate the moving cost by type, and we estimate the demand for each location, which is kind of the residential location fixed effect. And with the estimated residential location fixed effect, we estimate demand parameters, which is the housing price elasticity and the commuting cost. So let me show the results here. So what we find is that the low education people has a higher housing price elasticity than the high education people. This just very preliminary results, and we find that commuting time matters here. We actually have some illustrative example to show how the difference in the housing demand elasticity, price elasticity can contribute to the rise in segregation. So what we do in the next step, we'll construct the city-level income inequality for the reduced form part, and we'll complete the dynamic sort model with the housing supply part to have the equilibrium condition, and we'll show the contractual outcomes under alternative land supply and probably transportation infrastructure, because they have different implications for education and low education people. So yeah, that's the end of story today.
Maybe time for one question for Dean.
Okay, I'm reading through the page I need to. But when we talk about segregation, I guess in terms of context, it's a very important area of ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because within big cities, a lot of so that can contribute. They have very little.
Yes, so we cannot do that from the Baidu Maps data because Baidu Maps cannot infer whether you are migrant or not, but we are working on that using 2015, like the mini census, because we know that whether you are migrants or not, so we probably can first check whether they have differential residential patterns. We are working on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yizeng. The next paper. Okay. Next paper is by Carol Masur, spatial misallocation in education. You want to use the 30 minutes?
Yes, just bring the questions on the way. I'll try to handle it. So my name is Karol, and this is joint project with Kazu Shiga from Keio University and Chao who was a postdoctoral fellow at our university. I'm from school in Shenzhen here close by. So this is about special mislocation in education. And the motivation for the project comes from the literature, I think pretty broad now. Here's some papers from this strand of work on inequality of opportunities, how they may shape economic outcomes. We know, for instance, from empirical papers by Chetty and co-authors studying this moving to opportunity experiment, that being as a child being born in poorer, disadvantaged neighborhoods can shape their education, professional outcomes. This is US. For China, we have also some papers, Connolly, Chen, Hanum, that show that there are large disparities in quality of education between rural and urban China. Think of quality of teachers, infrastructure kids get, and so on. This is kind of based on, I don't know, some administrative data sets, and they're not really so much experimental as maybe Chetty was doing, right? Some papers nowadays, they put these ideas of these neighborhood effects or special inequalities and inequality of opportunities into structural models. I don't know, maybe one example is Chang Kai-shek's paper with co-authors on misallocation of talent in the US due to racial or gender discrimination. Eric Chen and Diego Darwich, this year's AER, they put ideas of Chetty into a structural model and then analyze the effects of these vouchers in a general equilibrium framework. So these are two papers, examples of two papers on US. To the best of my knowledge, we don't have any evidence on this in terms of structural work on the equilibrium consequences of these special inequalities and of opportunities for China. And that's what we are trying to contribute here with in this paper. So that's the goal, to contribute to this literature on misallocation of talent, the case study of China, focusing on land reforms as an instrument that will give us some variation that hopefully can get us some causality. So in this literature on land reforms in China, we know already several things. So already a relatively large literature by now. Paper in research by Chari and co-authors, they show this direct effects of the reforms, that the land rental market starts functioning and the agricultural productivity takes off. We know also from the last year's QJ by Paso and co-authors that not only land rental markets pick up, but also people start relocating across sectors, right? So that also helps, we know that. And then this year's working paper by Tim Chen, Rachel, and Jaja Wang, they show that these land reforms, they also have this kind of gender balancing effects. They help to extract women from agriculture into other sectors, and by doing so may stimulate structural transformation. What we don't know still is what is the impact of these land rent reforms on human capital accumulation of children of migrants, and we'll be thinking here a lot about left behind kids in China and the macroeconomy. So we will try to throw it into the GE slide. Okay, so this is our research question. So we will be combining the empirical work with structural model. The main idea is, I guess, maybe especially here will be in Hong Kong, intuitive. Land insecurity can constitute a reason for migrant workers to leave behind their spouses in the rural place of origin, and spouses usually would be left with kids. When the land security reform comes in, the propensity to bring the families to the cities increases. They're less afraid of land reallocations, and this may stimulate these effects of increasing opportunities for kids being in public areas. There are these caveats of public versus private schooling sectors in China. We'll try to handle this a little bit. So if we believe in these large disparities between rural and urban areas, then consequences of such reforms can be non-trivial, working through these intergenerational human capital accumulation channels. Okay, so here's first maybe very suggestive evidence with a lot of endogeneities probably behind that these disparities between rural and urban areas are potentially large and have these long-run implications. So this is evidence from CFTS 2010, where we have data on IQ of the adult person. So the sample is people between this age. We know what is their IQ measured by the standardized IQ test. This is some test following US health and retirement study, and it's supposed to capture fluid intelligence. In this cognitive science, this is fluid intelligence is supposed to capture your inborn ability as opposed to crystallized intelligence, which is more like what you acquire throughout your life cycle as a kid. So it's not supposed to be probably for inborn. No, take it as you would like. So these are adults, and we know their data. We have data on their Huckel status, okay, and they are always urban Huckel, always rural, or rural-urban changes, okay? So this is our proxy maybe for migration. I know there's a lot of endogeneity here, but that's just, maybe first attempt to look at the problem here. What we see, this is the baseline scatter plot, just IQ versus probability of completing college by these people of 25 years plus. We see that conditional on the same ability proxy IQ test, we see large gaps between always rural and always urban people, and that this gap closes for rural or urban people changes. So as if migration could maybe help here, all right? Here we add age controls and gender, and here we restrict the sample to only currently urban samples. So we rule out the location preference story, right? By removing the rural steps. Okay, they want to be in urban, and as long as education has a bigger payoff in urban sector, they should try to attend the college, and we still see the gaps here. Okay, so these gaps are kind of as a first test here visible. Okay, so we're going to now think about this problem and trying to use the land rights reforms as a shock that changes the locations of people in China. So a bit of a history maybe on land rights reforms in here. First, 1998, the government extended land use rights for households by another 30 years. At that time, rentals are illegal in kind of goods. I don't know in practice, but that's in practice it can be different story, but I think that's the law, right? Then in 2003 comes this wave of reforms that has been studied in the Charlie and Crowther's paper, Rural Land Contracting Law, which codifies these land rights. It's not very formalized yet, but rentals are not illegal anymore, at least at the small scale. So this apparently this rental market start to pick up in response to these years. These reforms, which are implemented in this period in a staggered way in different provinces at a different time. Okay, that's their identification, which will be similar for us. And then there's a second wave of reforms starting in 2013, which formalizes these land rights at the higher level. They allow not only these leasing, but for actual transfers of farmers' land rights. Okay, this is more formal, higher degree of security here, and also allow for collateralization of these land rights. And the government was explicitly trying to also create conditions for creation of these large commercial farms. And then all of this apparently ends in the recent years with formal land certifications, like formal certificates are being issued, and there are land laws changed which remove. So actually, they didn't say this until almost 2018. There was a law in place which said that if you migrate with your whole family, and family is father, mother, kids, and you change your hukou from non-agricultural to non-agricultural, you should give back land to the village authorities. And this law is removed. and they separate it, right, at that time. All right, so we will be studying these two waves of reforms implemented in a staggered way in China for identification purposes. All right, and that's the list of provinces of China when they implemented it. This is from the Chari paper, Chari 2021. And this is the later wave of reforms. We got this from websites of government, from different sources. So different places also implement this at different periods of time. That's what we will be using in our event studies. Yes. Okay. I mean, the model will be, the model we don't talk about rural taxation too much. We will see how we think about tax, but that could be in the IV results because it increases the income, right, of the rural households. So let's see that. Yes. Okay. So two. Yes. No questions. No. So these two reforms we want to investigate. So I think it's kind of typical in research on China that we are using many different data sets. The key data set will be CNDS. We also rely on CFPS, Gansu survey for some mechanism analysis, 1% sample, what else? Yearbook for education spending, CLDS for wage income data, CHIPS for some mechanism analysis on land security. So there's a lot of data sets we're trying to patch together here. And this is the first result, which shows that higher land security has reduced the number of kids left behind. Okay, so this is going to be on CNDS. CNDS is a repeated cross-section. So unfortunately, it's not a panel, but we will kind of use it in an even study with a cross-section, right? Repeated cross-section. So the outcome is we see everybody's a migrant in the data, and we see the family of this migrant. And we see whether the kid of the migrant of agriculture or FUCO has their kid in the current location or not. And we see the sample to parents with underage kids. Okay, so that's meaningful outcome here. Kid or spouse actually too is left behind or not, that's the outcome. And then we take the 2013, the second wave of reforms, into we throw it into the Callaway-Santana estimator for the event study, and that's gonna give us this identification. So treated are children of respondents from provinces treated earlier than others. Okay, and that's the regression. Current county fixed effect of the migrant parent, time fixed effect included, and some controls with different specifications. Yes.
So the land reform also affects adults migration decision, so it could affect two samples in CND.
Yes, it could. I think they claim national representativeness, but
only sample the migrant.
Yes, correct. Yeah. I guess that's gonna be the model part then, because those responses will be also there. But I cannot say more with this data set, right? So two results. I should maybe start with spouses because this validates results of the paper of Rachel and co-authors. They show precisely this, that when the reforms are introduced, the share of separated spouses goes down. So those spouses from countryside are taken to the city. So they show it in the different data set. They have much more granular coding of the reform than we do. But the result seems to be here, and I think this kind of speaks maybe in kind of a certain level that this is not some artifact. But then more important for us is that we see that the share of kids left behind goes down by 10 percentage points. This is around 30% drop in the sample from the pre-reform levels. robustness checks, and second result. So if you have questions, ask. If not, then let's move. Second result, the key. So we show now one result. Key less left behind kids moving to cities. Now, what happens to these kids, right? We want to argue, like Chetty does, that these kids, they benefit from better education outcomes on average, at least. Yes.
So we have, because now they can use the land to others and then get some money to move the family, or is that because they now don't need the family to occupy the land of the land? So which one do they think is going to?
So I think the land lease income will not be that high to kind of like change your economic landscape of the family, but it is a fact for sure that is there. I think it's more about the land relocation risk, that your family is moving out, and then the village council has a legal claim on land to move it to someone else. That risk will be removed. And I think people think about land appreciation in the long run, and they are very hesitant to risk losing it. Like the current income flow from leasing, I think is not going to be that much, but people often, I think, from my understanding, hope that the price will like go like Shenzhen style, you know.
But for example, your parents take care of the land.
Grandparents.
Grandparents.
Yeah. So 3 answers to this. So from legal point of view, family is father, mother, children. Grandparents are not members of family. So the law says clearly, family moves out, land can be taken away in foreign form. So I mean, implementation might be different stuff. Second is, I think, practical. There's another piece of law that says that if land is left fallow for 2 consecutive years, then the village council has to relocate it to someone else. The question is about the ability of grandparents in actually cultivating the land, given the age. Third, and that this also compounds with the issue of there was a baby boom in 1960s China. So the grandparents, they might have a lot of babies to take care of and a lot of plots of land. So I don't know how feasible that would be in practice. And the third answer is, I think, the best reference to authority. So Rachel and I also, they use this mechanism in similar way, that once you move away as a father, husband and wife, then you risk the land loss. So they also kind of, I think we have more, some mechanism of the results that I can show maybe, but we similarly as them, we think that grandparents, they cannot solve the whole issue. Okay, I mean, to some extent maybe, but not fully. Okay, so second result, urban environment improves education of rural kids. So now we will use the earlier wave of reforms, the 2003. Okay. Sample is again CMDS. People who are 20, 30 years old at the time of the survey, who are of rural origin. What does it mean? They are not local born in urban area where we see them. Either them or their parents have agricultural hook. That's our notion of rural origin. And they have migrated to urban areas before 16 years old. Why 16? Because 16 you choose to enroll into high school or not, and it's voluntary in China. And they migrated before the reform, or this will be not treated, or in the year of reform, or 1 year after, to have like a kind of a tight time window for the treatment effects. And we also keep people who did not migrate out of rural at all, to kind of have a little bit maybe less selected sample and show that I don't know if this works. So this is the second stage, probability of university. So we see whether they have a university degree or not. And we see how many years as a kid until 16 years old they have spent in urban environment. Okay, so this goes from 0 to 16. This is super endogenous, and we're gonna hit this with this instrument now of effective reform years exposure. Okay, what is this? It's a maximum between 0 and this, this is minimum between 16 and 16 and this. Okay, so what is this? This is a combination of the timing of the reform introduction in the province of their origin and their individual birth year. Okay, so there's a province level treatment. You all come from, I don't know, from Guangdong, and Guangdong gets treated, I don't know, I don't remember the year now, in let's say 2006, and you happen to be born maybe in 2006. Then you have potentially 16 years of exposure to the reform. If you were already 16 in 2006, then it doesn't give you much of a, you know, the train has left, right? Kind of like you can go to the city, but you have completed the 16 years of education, of primary and middle education already in your countryside. So this will not give you much of a education boost if you move to the city at the age of 16, assuming that there are differences between rural and urban education institutions.
The CMD is only sample people from urban areas. So,
Yes, but we know the family structure of these migrants. So we know the so the family structure, and we know their origin. So they are in the cities. Oh, but I'm saying that we'll keep these guys. I think we have the rural. I think there are migrants from rural to rural areas too. Maybe.
I think you'll be missing a lot of people to stay in rural. If we use this.
So I don't remember now. So either these are rural to rural migrants, or these are kids of old migrant parents who had stayed, and we still see and they are like adult kids, and we see their education outcomes. So I think that could be these two types of people that I'm describing here, okay? But I have to go back to this problem. Okay. Okay, so that's the instrument. This is the first stage. So one more, so here we have what are almost 35,000 individuals. So you know, size of CMDS is pretty small, but that's the sample we can work with. Different fixed effects. Here only year and province of origin fixed effects, and here we are adding migration destination, birth year fixed effect, gender fixed effects. And we see that this instrument has strong first stage, that the earlier was the reform in someone's life implemented in the province of origin, the higher is the number of years they spend in urban. So for 1 extra year of reform exposure, 0.8 or 0.7 extra years in urban. Okay, so this is the first stage. And this is the second stage. We also show outcomes for high school, because high school is actually a voluntary stage of education in China. First 4 columns are OLS, and here we have IV, then the same comparison with different sets of fixed effects. We see that higher number of years spent in urban during childhood of a person increases probability of high school graduation and university graduation, and these effects survive and become point estimates become even larger after instrumenting. So that could be consistent with a positive selection of migrants, that those who are advantaged in migration, they are kind of biasing results down to 0, and IV kind of recovers the maybe one that's like unbiased estimates. Okay, so that's the result. If you spend full 16 years of your childhood in urban areas, being a kid of rural origin in the sense of your parents, then your probability of enrolling in completing university increases by 13 percentage points. So that goes in the direction of closing these rural-urban gaps we've seen in the CFPS motivation results. All right, so this is also placebo test for this IV. So now we look at the sample of urban kids. Kids who are currently urban, they themselves have non-agricultural hukou, or their parents also have non-agricultural hukou, and also those who are local born without having moved at all. For this sample, this reform should not predict any moves, right? Because the reform is relaxing land security for the agricultural group of people. These people should not be affected. The first stage is gone. So we are happy about this as well. Okay, so we have some mechanism analysis where we where we show that indeed in 2000s China, if people moved, then this has triggered land reallocation. So it's a land risk was materialistic, material. And also some suggestive, so that's way less causal stuff. The suggestive evidence that these reforms have reduced this probability of land reallocations after reforms. So I will skip this now, and I will maybe quickly go through the model. So we want to look at these issues from like some sort of a general equilibrium perspective. This will be a kind of long run model. I know long run is not good for China, but it's good for computations. Each period is 30 years, horizon is infinite. It's going to be like an IFR model with heterogeneous agents. Each period is 30 years, so one period is one generation. And at each point in time, we think of one agent as a family of two members, a parent and a child. Okay, very simple view of the world. Two locations in principle, urban and rural. State variables, current family location, assets. So there's a dynamic asset accumulation, human capital, and inborn ability. So every agent, so this will be OLG with perfect altruism. Every agent lives for two periods, so lifetime of one person is 60 years. Given the state vector, the kid receives education for period t+1, so they receive education in period t, and this education gives fruits in t+1 in terms of labor income. This is the technology, inborn ability, and education spending. And this education spending is location specific, right? Parents' work, labor income. This is kid becomes parent in the next period. And at the end of every period, parent chooses location of residence, work for their kids, and this will pin down the location of education for their grandchildren as well. So there is this decision making and non-borrowing constraint. Okay, so two locations, but four possible configurations for the family. One is rural kid, rural earner. Second is rural kid, urban earner. So these are left behind kids. Urban earners and urban child together, but with agricultural hukou, and both urban with non-agricultural hukou. So these two categories will differentiate them to capture the differences in quality of education between urban, agricultural, and non-agricultural hukou holders. Okay? So we smooth stuff this discrete choice with extreme value shocks and this size. Wages are for now exogenous. We may want to endogenize it. They're ranked, but that's pinned down by the data. Education spending also is ranked. That's also from the data. And land income. So how do we think about land income? There's 1 unit of land L bar that everybody gets. I'm wrapping up. And there's a price of land which we calibrate. L bar is pinned down from resource constraints. So some people get L bar without any risk, and some face this land income risk. Okay, so depending on your location, you face this risk. So this is pre-reform China. When you reform China, introduce full land security, these phi's are set to 0. That will be our reform. Okay, so I'm gonna fast forward now. This is what happens in terms of population shares in this economy, moving from China around 2010 to kind of China we think of now, with these land risk coefficients being both 0. What you see here is that the shares of rural kids go down, so the blue and orange, they shrink, and the mass of left behind also goes down, and this actually validates our event study that I showed you initially. That's a model validation tool. And then urban shares go up, and we now it's only two steady states that we compare. We want to maybe do transition soon. Some large effects, which I mean, the model is still in progress. There's still a lot of work to do. So with grain of salt, but I mean, mobility increases, and you know, a happy story here. But there is actually a trade-off because you see that land per capita goes down. So what does it mean is that some people who really like to be in rural areas, they will be worse off because they will have to share land now with those who went to the cities. So they will have less land to cultivate. So winners or losers are actually there. So not so happy at the end, more dramatic. So that's it. Thank you very much. It's a work in progress. So every comment very welcome. Thanks a lot.
Okay, no time for questions. We resume at 3:25, right, Nadia?